So greetings one and all, wherever you are in the universe, and welcome to the latest episode of an Espresso Shot of Confidence, the podcast that explores all aspects of confidence, challenges taboos and unhelpful narratives, and empowers you to be awesome, loudly and proudly. It's time for you to grab a drink and settle in for the next however long this episode is. I'm your host, the Master of Awesomeness, Ashley Griffiths, and today we're going to be talking all about burnout. And who better to talk to about this than the awesome Zane McCormack, the founder of The Assured Man, who helps his clients look after themselves, build resilience, and avoid burnout. Hey Zane, how you doing?
Hi, morning, Ash. Hi, great. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. So, burnout, it's something you know intimately. So,
Unfortunately, yeah, a
yeah,
little bit of personal experience of it as well. So, yeah,
absolutely. So, what what is it? I mean, can you just share a little bit about your story and why you're now helping people with this?
yeah, that's probably a great place to start, Ash. So my background is I'm a Kiwi. I came over to the UK over 20 years ago now, playing rugby. After that sort of finished up, I joined the police down in Devon and Cornwall. I had 16 years policing. And I left policing about a year ago to set up what I'm doing now. And with burnout, my situation was that 2020, um, well, lockdown is a bit of a poignant time for a lot of people, but for me, it was quite personal because when the world was locking down, I was already locked down. About a month before lockdown actually happened, I'd collapsed on the way into work, had a physical collapse. At the time, no one really knew what was going on. So I had the usual sort of couple of months off work with everything. When I came back, the world had changed. It was like one of those apocalyptic movies where sort of someone goes to sleep and wakes up, and the meteors landed or the zombies have taken over. So I came back into a very, very different world to the one that I left, and obviously went back into policing it as well. That's a whole other story. But what happened was, so I collapsed. I had a moment where I lost probably 2 hours, and then had 10 days where I was particularly unwell. And then when I came out of it, obviously everything sort of services wrapped around. I had sort of put in front of people and spoke to people and the rest of it. And at the time, sort of PTSD type symptoms were sort of diagnosed and looked at, just on the back of a couple of particularly unpleasant jobs that I dealt with leading up to the incident. And so I went through all that, came back, but it was only about 6 months later that things started sort of feeling a little bit off again. But this time, I sort of realised what it felt like. So I put my hand up to it and spoke to somebody else. And that was the first time I'd heard the word burnout. It wasn't until I sat down with a therapist, reviewed all my notes, went through everything, and this time went through the last 10 years, not just the last sort of 2 months leading up to the incident. She just looked at everything, folded her notepad over and said, Zane, you just burnt out. That was the first time I heard the word. And when that happened, as soon as I had something I could hang a hook on, I got curious. I want to know what this was, what it did. And the more I looked into it, the more I realised I'd been an absolute walking cliche for the previous 10 years. I'd quite happily sailed through all the stages, gone through from 1 to 5 quite happily, and I could look back at key moments in my my life and my career with stuff that I was dealing with. I could see where I quite clearly stepped over into the next stage. And the big thing that came from it, though, was the World Health Organization sort of classified burnout as sort of poorly managed workplace stress. But for me, the situation I had was, so for 16 years I was policing, and stress hadn't changed. I was still doing the same jobs with the same incidences and everything else with the shift work and everything else. But what had changed for me was my personal situation. So I was dealing with a lot of stuff outside of work. So what really hit home for me was that we talk about resilience and energy levels and the rest of it. So the areas of my life where I could have realistically expected to be recharging in, I just wasn't. I was going from work to difficult situations at home to difficult situations living in the UK, sort of away from family and friends as well. And just, my energy levels were just depleted to a point where my body in the end just said, you just need to stop. And like I say, we talk about burnout with being other cliches. It doesn't sneak up on anybody. If you know what you're looking for, the warning signs are all there, and it had been sending me warning signs for years and years and years. But I'd been discounting them. I had no idea what they were. So all the ones we talk about, I was able to sort of the feelings of the exhaustion, the overwhelm. Well, getting old. I'm not sort of 21 anymore. I'm still working shifts. So, I've got a young family, and you put it down to that. A lot of physical issues as well, sort of aches and pains and sort of inflammatory issues. But, I played rugby for 15 years. So I should be getting up and having things that hurt in the morning. And I had issues with gut health as well. But again, just wrote it off. I work shifts. I drink a lot of coffee. That must be what it is. And it really wasn't until I sat down and started addressing a few of the issues that most of those symptoms vanished overnight. And poor skin too. I was 40 years old with the skin of an 18-year-old.
Wow.
With stuff like that, and it's all to do with sort of stress. Because the other thing that it does, it also impacts your immunity as well, and your ability to to fight off these sorts of things. So, and there was a moment. It was like overnight, gut sorted itself out, skin sorted itself out. A lot of the aches and pains that I had just were all of a sudden, the inflammation side of it were vanished overnight.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful stuff. I think when you think about it, like we live in a culture that really tells us that we need to be doing more. We need to be working harder. We need to be hustling. And a lot of people just kind of battle through.
Yeah.
They're like, I ain't got time for this.
No.
I ain't got time to deal with this. And at some point, you will get a receipt.
Yeah.
For sure, you see it, and you're hearing a lot more people talking about the fact that they're burnt out now.
Yeah.
Solo business owners, people that are employed, even like you said on a personal level, people are saying they're just burnt out by life. We're seeing it and we're hearing it talked about a lot more. But one of the things you mentioned there was that there's different stages to this. So what was it you meant by that?
Okay. So we talk about the 5 stages. The first 2 stages are just normal life, sort of ups and downs. You sort of get to a point where you get a little bit worn out, but nothing that a decent holiday doesn't sort out. Or if you just take a step back and start doing a little bit of self-care, taking care of yourself, that won't sort of pull you back to where you need to be. But then we talk about when you're sort of tipping over from that into your early stages of burnout. So the 3 symptoms of burnout that people need to be aware of is that the first one is sort of the exhaustion and overwhelm. And if everything's in balance, you'll get those moments where you are a little bit tired, a little bit exhausted. But like I say, a weekend just chilling out and taking care of yourself, on Monday you're fine. But it's when that exhaustion and overwhelm doesn't get sorted by a holiday, or doesn't get sorted if you start looking after your sleep. Well, it's a bit more than that. Emotional dysregulation is another one as well. Because the big thing with burnout is what happens is to your body. If you're overwhelmed, your body will start shutting down the non-essential parts that it needs to be operating. It's like your car going into limp mode. And the first few things that it shuts down is the frontal part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of your brain that looks after all your emotions, your decision-making, your rationalizations and stuff like that. So what you do find is you start getting irritable. You start getting a lot shorter with people. And again, for me, I was able to discount that by saying, well, I'm a police officer. I work with police officers and I deal with villains, 2 of probably the most difficult sort of people in the world. So understandably, I'm going to be a little bit sort of, irritable with people. So, you've got that going on as well. But then also feelings of distancing as well, sort of numbness. You stop enjoying the things that you used to. So you stop looking forward to things. So if you had stuff you did in the weekends, like if you were, regularly went to football matches with your mates, if you're just not looking forward to that anymore, if you're getting there and it's just like a little bit blur, time with your family, feeling a little bit distanced. And again, for me, I'd come off night shifts, and that first day when you come off night shifts, you always write off saying it's zombie time. But when that zombie time sort of went on to the second and third day of your rest days, that's when those were my warning signs that I was ignoring. And then the third thing we need to be looking at is your professional capacity, and that is just a consequence of the effects of the first 2, that exhaustion and the emotional dysregulation. Because the big thing it does is it affects your ability to make decisions. And if you're in a role, if you're in a creative role, you need to be sitting down and creating, making decisions, working things out, coming and reacting to things. All of a sudden, you're unable to, and so all of a sudden your professional sort of capacity is reduced. And for me, what I was finding is that because obviously policing, I need to be going out there. You've got very low margin of error. If you mess something up or you miss something, there's a lot of some quite serious consequences for that. And so for me, what I was finding is I was having to put all my energy into keeping my professional face going, and just had nothing left when it came to dealing with anything else that was going on. So the three things is that overwhelming exhaustion, that emotional dysregulation, and the reduced professional capacity. They're the three things that you need to be looking at as key indicators for it.
For sure. I mean, some of the stuff you were saying there, right there, that sounded like there was a lot of crossover with depression.
You know what?
In terms of that distancing
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
dysregulation, and the irritability.
yeah. And you know what? And that's the interesting thing. The more I'm looking, okay, it's difficult because I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not qualified to sort of offer any sort of opinion on it. But there are a lot of similarities, which is why when I first came into it, the sort of CPTSD was diagnosed, and they were looking at taking it on that way because there's a lot of crossover with the with the symptoms. The difference, and for me, the only reason I was able to discount CPTSD was the fact that when I started treating it as burnout, everything, it was really impactful. And again, and with depression, obviously the other things too is understand the difference between mental health and mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And by looking after yourself, looking after your environment and everything else, you can impact your mental health and making sure that you're keeping on top of things. But mental illness is a whole other kettle of fish, and that can come on for anyone regardless of your situation. So making sure that we're understanding the difference between those two and not conflating them.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the things that you mentioned there, when you're kind of in the trenches with this, when you get to that point, when you're at that stage where you are emotionally dysregulated, when you're irritable, when you've got the fog, when
Yeah,
you end up getting stuck in a feedback loop, right?
yeah.
And it can be very difficult to get out of that.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, with emotional dysregulation, it does remove your ability to take a step back and look at it objectively. Everything's subjective, and it affects your stress responses. So you've obviously got your fight, flight, your freeze. What happens is once your prefrontal cortex functions sort of go to pot, you're having to go back and rely on your basic sort of operating systems,
Hmm.
and that's your caveman systems, and that's how that's walking out of your cave and reacting to what's coming at you. And most of what comes at you, most of what was coming at us 10,000 years ago were lethal threats. So you
Yes.
had to be quite sort of on the ball with that. But the other thing is too is understanding about those. So when we talk about your fight, your flight, your freeze, but the fourth one is one that people don't talk about much, and that's your fawn. And that's
Okay.
so if you think about someone running at you with a knife, your options are
Yeah.
fight them, run from them, or sort of try and plead with them. So that's your freeze. But say your fawn would be there, trying to sort of plead with them and please them and people please. And where that sort of comes in is when we talk about boundaries. So especially at work, if if people are starting to walk on you, or you've got a few issues around your performance, so maybe HR are getting involved, you're in no position to fight your corner and explain what's going on because you're just there
Yeah.
trying to avoid those stressful, difficult conversations. And so then it starts rolling on again. So I'm doing a little bit of work with HR departments, just getting them to understand that when you're dealing with someone whose performance may be impaired because of the burnout, they're not in the best position to advocate for themselves as well, which is again another function that's been shut down through the burnout.
That's a really powerful angle to look at that.
Mm,
I'd never really heard about the form, but I can see it now that you
yeah,
explained it like that. I think of say certain situations in my life when I was going through burnout where I was exactly like that. Just it's almost kind of what's the word, submissive. You're
yeah,
like when you look back at it, you're like, why didn't you fight your corner, Ash? It
yeah.
was like because there was nothing there.
Yeah, you had nothing
you
because
know?
having those difficult conversations takes energy, and the whole
Yeah.
point of burnout is you've got none. And if anything, when you are burnt out, the analogy a lot of people like to use is the battery analogy. When your battery are almost depleted, but it's worse than that because when you're burnt out, if you switch it around and start thinking about your energy levels as your finances, and when you're fine, your bank account's in credit, and that's your resilience. So
Hmm.
you've got that. But when you're burnt out, that's the equivalent of going into overdraft. And all of a sudden, the money you're spending has an extra cost because you got interest that you're on full for that. It's like maxing out your credit card, and what it does mean. And then with your resilience, if you're already maxed out on your credit card and you're deep in your overdraft, you don't have that resilience if the car fails MOT or the boiler
Yeah.
goes. or you need to find some money quickly for something. That's where your resilience is. And if you're in burnout, if you're in sort of energy debt, you don't have it. And it's those are the moments when that's when people realise they've got issues, but it's already too late because you need that energy to be able to cope with it. And if you haven't sort of taken care of yourself and making sure that you're keeping yourself fine when things are fine, then it's too late when things are at the wall.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, isn't it? I think in life, a lot of humans, what they'll do is they take action when they hit that crisis point.
Yeah.
And even though, like you were saying earlier on, your body's literally screaming at you.
Yeah.
You need to do something. You need more sleep. You need to take a break. You need to take whatever it is that the body's saying to you, whatever symptoms are coming out of your body that's like, look, pay attention. Like you said, you got the skin issues or the stomach issues or stuff. So, I mean, what can people do to prevent themselves from getting to that crisis point? What actions can they take to stop it getting to that point?
If I could wave my magic wand and have one thing happen, it would be just to give people that understanding that they need to be taking action when things are going well. When things are going well, that's when you need to be building your foundations, building your healthy habits, making sure. And we talk about self-care, rest, and the rest of it. It's getting those habits built in now so that you're building your resilience, so that when you do hit those bumps in the road, those personal bumps, those professional bumps, you've got that resilience to be able to go over it, you sort of react, sort of adapt, and push on. So that they're not ones that throw you off the road. And again, because the problem we have is the general advice for burnout is self-care and rest. That's the generic sort of advice. So whenever people end up going off, what I'm seeing all the time, I had it myself, was go home, just get yourself away from work, don't worry about what's going on, and the rest of it. Rest, look after yourself. That's the advice you need if you're starting to struggle a little bit when you're first noticing. But by the time you got to that point is ineffective. Because what's happened is you're not addressing your behaviours and you're not addressing the fundamental problems that have got you to in the first place. All you're doing is putting everything on hold. And when you go back, if you've not done the work on yourself and you're not done the work on what's going on, you're heading for a fall again like I did. And it's very, very common for a lot of people to have an initial bit of time off, feel fine because it's like you've got your hand under some boiling water, so you pull your hand out, go away, things are fine. So then you're going to put your hand back under the water again, and if you haven't addressed the temperature of the water and what's going on, all that's going to happen is you're going to burn your hand again.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely. So in terms of your journey, so you mentioned like for you had the realization it was burnout.
Yeah.
That's what you'd got to, that you'd gone through all the stages and you were suffering from severe burnout. So what steps did you take to kind of bring yourself back from that and to help build your resilience so you didn't go back to it?
Yeah, it was just a moment of sitting down, because at the time everything had been such a whirlpool and it had been so tumultuous with everything that had been going on. I'd just been reacting to things that had been happening. So it was a case of using the time off the second time properly to sit back and go, right, what do I want? What does my next 10 years look like? Where do I want to be? And start working back and sort of getting a bit of planning in place as well. And the other thing to be remembering is that there's a guy I've got a lot of time for, a guy called Nick Petrie. And if anyone can spend some time looking up his work, it's well worth a bit of a stalk through what he's doing. For two reasons. The first one, he's another Kiwi, so his accent is bang on the money. So you've got that bonus of listening to the accent. But also the guy knows his onions. He's probably one of the most impressive guys I've come across with what he's doing. So the one thing Nick talks about is the idea that what drove your success in your 20s will burn you out in your 40s. So understanding that for a lot of people that have got to where they are, has taken a lot of sacrifice, a lot of effort, and a lot of energy. And the energy that is required, coming through school with your grades, getting into the courses you want to be doing, coming out from that, getting into the roles that you want to be doing, sort of pushing on for promotions and setting yourself up, is just not sustainable long term. And it gets to a point where you've got to stop and reassess where you're putting your energy and looking at where your energy is flowing, what you're maintaining with that energy, and sorting that out. And that was really what it was. And it wasn't something I sat down overnight and went, right, this is what I need to be doing. This took me probably 18 months to work out. It wasn't like a Damascene moment where I went, right, I need to be pulling them back together. And it's only once I've started doing what I'm doing now that I come across work from guys like Nick that I sort of saw where I got to those points, but the long way around. So it's understanding that you need to be changing. He also talks about the fact that rest isn't what sorts burnout is. It's being able to adapt. It's being able to adapt to your situation, adapt to who you are, and adapt with what's happening. You can't expect to sort of pile on for 40 years running on the same sort of motivations and with what you had.
For sure, for sure, for sure. And you talk a lot about balance in your content online,
Yeah,
about achieving that balance. And everybody's heard of things like the work-life balance. To the point it almost became fairly cliched. You'll see posts all around, people talk about it all the time. Yet so many people struggle with that.
yeah,
So many people struggle to juggle their responsibilities and end up stressed and overwhelmed. You mentioned earlier on about how, during your burnout, you were struggling to kind of juggle what was going on at work with what was going on at home. So how can people bring more calm and balance into their lives?
I think the first thing is to have a real understanding of what work-life balance actually means. And I think a lot of people look at it on a real micro level and look at, well, during the day I need to be doing X amount of time exercise, I need to be working for 8 hours, and I need to be doing this for my family. And that isn't realistic. There are times in your life where you just need to go all in with something. If a project comes into work, you need to be able to say, look, I'm not going to be available for the next, whatever it is, couple of weeks, couple of months, and understand that, that's what's going on. But have an endpoint and say, look, I'm going to be hammering it for this amount of time. But at the end of it, there's going to be a holiday, or there's going to be where I'm going to pull back and I'm going to consciously make sure I'm switching back into what I need to be doing. And it's taking that long view with work life. But while you're doing that, making sure you're getting a few basic sort of things in place. So looking at so how you're moving, what you're consuming, and your relationships, making sure that you're touching base with those every so often. You don't have to making sure that every day you're sitting down and having your affirmations and the rest of it, but just make sure that you're being intentional with keeping that and having a little check in every week or so to make sure, how's the diet, how's my doom scrolling. There's a lot of data coming out now around sort of the impact on that with our cognitive functions and how we're thinking. But I think Ash, we could probably probably square off another whole morning for that one. But
Oh,
again,
for
and
sure.
it's about being intentional and making sure that you're not sort of just drifting and going back into your default mode. Because the thing with people, half the things we do are habits. How you
Hmm.
when you wake in the morning, how you move around your house, how you interact with your friends, the conversations you have. Everything is all about sort of what we do, and just by default. So it's about making sure that a few things you're doing by default are healthy habits. So that when we're getting up in the morning, we've got a little routine around how we're eating, what we're consuming, making sure that we're on our way to work, that we're got a few little mental drills that we're doing to making sure that we're switching in for work. When we're at work, making sure that we're switching in with that, but also when we leave work, we're leaving work. And the big thing, I talk a little bit about bringing work home and having that sort of coming into your personal life. It's about making sure that you've got effective strategies in place, which is a bit of the work that I do with guys. Is making sure you're coming home and work staying at home, and you're coming home, and it's not coming into the house with you, including your home life as well.
Yeah, it's an important, but like, just want to kind of take that further a little bit. So there's a lot of people now that are working at home, and we've
Yeah,
got hybrid working as
yeah,
well. So, I mean, what strategies can people put into place with that? So if their work is at home, there is that temptation. I know I've done it.
yeah.
I know you've probably done it. Everyone, I'll just check my emails, or I'll just do a little bit. I'll just get on the LinkedIn and just type a few messages or stuff. I mean, what strategies can people put in
Yeah,
place to
I'd
stop
say
that?
you need to start getting quite deliberate with your boundaries. So when you finish work, when the laptop closes and gets put away, it's not left out on the desk or on the kitchen table or wherever it is. If it's a case if you have to switch the phone off, making sure that you're then able to make that, because like I say before, driving to work, driving home, you had that sort of demarcation and
Yeah.
that being able to do that shift. It's about getting a few sort of tricks and places to make sure that you're able to make that switch when you're at home as well. So making that mental switch, packing everything away, having a routine you go through just to sort of pack things down and say, right, that's it, done for the day, and then switching into the mode you need to be for your family, or the mode you need to be for your friends if you're going down to play with a five-a-side, or and not sort of putting that off, making sure that you're being quite deliberate with it. And like I say, lockdown changed everything for everybody, and I think a lot of people like the idea of working from home, but I think after a couple of months of it, the realities of it really started heading back with a lot of people. And that's something I'm doing a bit of work now at the moment with a couple of businesses, just how they're managing their staff with that, because some people loved it and were
Yeah.
able to cope quite well with it, and struggled with it, in an office environment, just being a little bit more introverted, and having that space to be able to sit down and do that deep work. They found the home was a lot easier. So it's also understanding what you need as well,
Mm.
and taking it from there.
Oh, that's an important one. Yeah, totally with you on that. For me, with home working, there's certain things I love about it, but there's certain
Yeah,
things that I don't. I mean, the
yeah,
introvert in me loves it, but the extrovert in me hates it.
yeah,
Uh, it
yeah.
really does.
And I think
And
yeah. And we need that social connection on some level. And whether we're getting that from at work, and if we're not getting that from work, we need to making sure that we're being a lot more deliberate with it, with our other social connections, because we're social animals, and we're not
yeah.
wired to live in isolation, to live in our own little silos.
Oh, absolutely. I
Mm.
mean, and that isolation as well. I think that can kind of contribute as well, doesn't it?
Yeah,
To
absolutely. Yeah,
if you're in that burnout cycle, if you're going with mental ill health, it doesn't, maybe you need to take that step back initially, but ultimately in the long term,
yeah.
it doesn't do you any
No,
good.
and never underestimate the power of that social connection. Like I say, I talk a lot about our basic wiring system. Human 101, the operating system we were issued sort of 100,000 years ago, and we were designed to live in tribes and family groups, and to be able to rely on each other for security, for comfort, and that's still hard baked into our psyche. So what happens is, 100,000 years ago, if you found yourself isolated and alone, those were stressful times. You weren't able to relax. You had a lot of threats, and your body was constantly on edge. We still see that now. If you're alone and you don't have those social connections, your body never really is able to properly relax. And so you have the issues around sort of all the stress markers that come in with that. Even though you may not feel it on a real basic level, your body just isn't anywhere near as relaxed and able to recharge to anywhere near as well as it can do if you're maintaining those social connections.
Oh, totally that.
Mm.
Totally that. I can totally resonate
Yeah,
resonate with
and
that.
I think was I don't know, I can't quote it, but I think I saw a study the other day talking about the fact that chronic loneliness is as carcinogenic to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Yep.
With
There's a
the
lot of studies
yeah,
on the dangers of it and
yeah,
the health implications of isolation.
yeah,
Huge. It's yeah. I've read quite a few studies now on that. It's just kind of scary, really, the impact it has on all sorts of levels, be it on the immune system, on your
yeah,
cognitive functions, even your lung and your heart health.
yeah. No, exactly that, and that stems from just that body and that constant state of just low level stress. It's not something that you're probably even aware of, but your body is aware of it, and there's a lot of stuff that your body does that you're not aware of, but it just does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, for sure, for sure. And talking about social connections, a lot of the stuff I see regarding kind of burnout talks about the impact on an individual level. But burnout can actually, as mentioned, can impact groups, it can impact businesses,
oh,
it can
yeah.
impact social groups, family groups, can impact everyone. But let's focus more on the business side of things for a minute. So what can leaders do? You mentioned earlier on you've been talking to HR departments, but what can companies do? What can leaders do to ensure that their staff aren't heading head first into a burnout?
Okay, the first thing any leader can do, any founder, anyone running a team, is invest in yourself. Right, comes back to the old adage that you need to put your own oxygen mask on first. And we talk, we do a little bit of work around leadership, and we talk about sort of the shadow that leaders cast. And there's four things that people notice about leaders: what they say, what they do, what they reward, and what they ignore. So if you talk about leaders that are stepping up and sort of talking the talk and saying you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that, that's only one part of the other three things that they need to be thinking about. So the thing with burnout is that the biggest indicator for staff burning out is their boss burning out. If you are struggling yourself, your staff are 80% more likely to burn out as well, just because of the environment that you're setting. So it really is about really taking care of yourself and being a little bit selfish about it, and making sure that not only are you talking a good game, but you're also exhibiting a good game as well. So that when you are coming in, I mean, I've dealt with managers sort of that have, you come in and they're always roaring and shouting, and it's really uncomfortable in the office because of their behaviour, and it impacts on teams. When you've got teams that walk around eggshells all shift, it's difficult to sort of get anything done. But when you've got that proverbial swan sat in the corner who may be struggling himself, but on the face of it is able to keep it together, the impact it has on the rest of the team is immeasurable. And the other thing as well is, even within larger organisations, if you've got an issue with culture that it's struggling, a good leader will act as an umbrella and will shelter their team from that. And so if you have two teams in an organisation, and the one team that's got a half decent manager shielding their team from all that issues, their productivity levels are going to be a lot more enhanced than the team that's got a leader that's struggling themselves. So it's real simple little things, getting in there and working with them.
Yeah, I think that looking after yourself, it kind of comes back to that. I think there's a narrative for the longest time that was almost selfish to kind of put yourself first. But you used the adage there of you put your oxygen mask on. So for anybody who's thinking, well, no, I can't do that. I've got this, I've got these responsibilities, or they're throwing whatever excuses they're using because they don't think that, it would be selfish to put yourself first. Yeah. What would you say to them?
No, absolutely not. You're looking to exhibit best practice. You can't stand there and tell your team to not respond to emails in the evening, to make sure that you're taking breaks during the day, and all the other sort of little bits and pieces that you can do to ensure that your staff are able to perform to optimal if you're not doing it. Because as a leader, it's you just never know when people are watching, and that's where you're most impactful. Leading by example. So it's not selfish. It's just good business practice.
Oh, absolutely. And all the benefits that come from looking after yourself as well, right?
Yeah, and again, and the other thing is too that businesses need to be aware of is if your staff are burning out, they are nearly 3 times more likely to be looking for other work. And when I say 3 times, I'm talking about actively sending out resumes and applying for roles, not just doom scrolling sort of job sites, actively looking for other work. And then for every person that's leaving, you've obviously got issues around retention, recruitment, the financial implication of that. But then for every one person that actually takes action and leaves, you've got countless others that are slipping into the quiet quitting, which is a whole nother sort of topic, with the impact on productivity levels and sort of how things are with that.
Oh, absolutely. But it's taken a long time to get to the point, and I know with the work that you're doing, you're still kind of fighting that fight. And with this, but it's taken a long time for organizations to actually even take this seriously. The things that you're talking about, there's nothing new here.
No.
In terms of the issues, in terms of the productivity stuff, the management theorists, the motivational theorists were talking about some of this stuff best part of 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So why do you think it's taking people so long to really get on board with this?
I just think it's been the perfect storm with COVID. Really threw stuff into really sharp contrast with a lot of people, and anyone that was creaking any little cracks that may have been there that they're able to cover up just rammed a massive wedge in and opened them right up. So I think it's been that, probably combined with the tough sort of business conditions that are out there at the moment. Everyone's looking now to making sure that they're optimizing their performance. So everyone's always looking for that, for that hack, that quick fix to try and sort of pull things around. Like I say, 20 years ago, I talk to guys now that sort of my age, and they'll say, during their 20s and 30s, it was all about the hustle. They were there, they were working the long hours, they were neglecting their health. Work hard, play hard, and then unsurprisingly hit 40 and blew up. And so they're realising that the whole hustle culture was all a bit of a nonsense, really. And I talk about a little bit too about the we're all sort of business athletes. We're not it's effectively, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And if we're going to go out, if we're going to approach a marathon like a sprint, then we are just going to blow up. And so making sure you're able to pace yourself. Keep an eye on what's going on, know when to push, but also know when to pull back as well. So, and then there's a whole other study of work that I talk about around understanding your rhythms of how you operate. It's all about bursts of activity, knowing when to put the foot down and get on, but also know when to pull back, rest, recover, before you can push on again. And
Mhm.
by doing that, over the length of the time you need to be operating, you're going to be, you're optimizing your productivity with that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But it takes time, right? I think you
Yeah,
mentioned just a minute ago that we live in a culture that are constantly looking for quick fixes.
yeah. And
And
you know what? There are some really basic hacks. The quick
yeah,
fixes are out there. They're not the imaginary sort of rainbows that people chase and never find. They are actually out there. But what it does take is that ability to also to step back as well and get comfortable stepping back and get comfortable understanding that you need to be doing that in order to be able to push back on again. So it's nothing that I'm doing. I haven't invented any sort of miracle snake oil or anything like that. It's just really taking it back to basics and applying some real common sense.
for sure. And you talk a lot about that in your content on LinkedIn about you take those myths or those thoughts that people have and these beliefs or misconceptions they have about things and literally go in one sentence, no, do this instead.
Mm.
And it can be like you talked a lot about habits, um, but it's really making the time and actually, but making the time to actually make them happen, though, right?
Yeah, and again, it's and with anything, any habit forming, there is always that initial period of uncomfortableness where you just need
Mm.
to be able to do it, which is why the whole science around sort of how to implement and maintain habits is there, and it's not about and again, there'll be a few more posts coming out as we come into the new year. It's going to be everyone hitting sort of January 1st, right? This is the year I run Ironman, and I'm going to lose this, and I'm going to do that, and anyone that's got any idea about how this works is just going to sit there and ride that initial wave out, and then sort of come back at people in February and say, right, now you've had a crack at all that. How about we start doing it properly? And just taking it back down to little bite-sized, achievable sort of things. But also we talk about motivation. I saw you post this morning, Ash, around sort of have to and want to. People are eyeing up January 1st. I have to lose X amount of weight, or I have to start running every morning, or I have to start ice baths. But again, and it's understanding that it's when you get to a point where you want to do something, and that's when it
Mm.
becomes easy. You do it because you want to, not because you have to. Because have to means that it's going to fall over, and you're going to get back to where you were. And also, when you want to do something, you just start doing it. You won't have a January 1st, I'm going to do it, or I'm going to start doing it when I get to this point, then I'm going to start doing it. If you want to do something, you'll just start it. You don't, the motivation's
Oh,
already there.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm totally with you on that. I think
yeah,
the example I gave, like on your post today about the smoking, um, oh, I quit so many times
yeah.
because of family pressure, because I felt like, well, no, I have to. I've heard it's really bad for me, so I've got to quit. But I didn't want to.
No,
And then the one day I literally didn't associate any sort of pleasure. I did not get any pleasure from it anymore. It was making me feel physically sick.
mm,
And I literally quit like that.
yeah,
Okay, it took time to get to that point of my but actually listening to my body. It wasn't like an overnight thing, but on the outside it looked that way,
yeah,
that it was an overnight thing. But it was like, nah, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'd literally bought a pack of cigarettes that night, that day. And the next day I went up to see my girlfriend. We lived in the same apartment block. I literally go, there you go. What, you're not having one? No, you have them. I've quit. She went, shut up. I haven't
yeah.
spoke since. And that was like
You know what?
best
And you
part of
talk,
20 years ago
you
now.
know, and you talk to anyone that gave up, anything like that. That's what they'll tell you. One day you woke up and were, actually, I'm done. I'm just done with it. And that's what, and those are the ones that stuck.
Oh, for sure.
The people that are saying, right, this is my last packet. After this packet, I'm going to finish, or this is my last time I go to the pub. This is the last pint I have, or this is the last whatever it is, my last chocolate bar that I eat. Or they're not the ones that are that manage it. It's the ones that just wake up one day and are just done.
Yeah, man. It's the same happened with me becoming a vegetarian. I never meant to become a vegetarian. I just didn't eat meat for a week, and I
Yeah,
just never ate meat again after that.
no,
It was just one of those things. I wasn't on any sort of moral crusade. I literally just decided to take a detox, and that was it.
yeah,
Um, but I think just kind of coming back to that though, the whole New Year thing. Um, this time of the year, it usually starts around now, and then the diet ads and stuff, they'll start on Boxing Day.
Yeah,
You'll have loads of guilt, loads of like, what are you doing? What do you mean you enjoyed yourself over Christmas? How dare you?
yeah,
All of that stuff will be thrown around. And like you said, people will commit to these things because it's some kind of like arbitrary day and some tradition, and it's a new day, it's a new time, we've got to start, it's Q1 2024, got to get it done. And I'm just talking about it, my pitch and my get anxious just thinking about it.
yeah.
And people end up feeling overwhelmed by it. I mean, so what can they do to kind of avoid all that white noise?
I think that you take stock. If you're not prepared to do it now, if you're listening, or again, I appreciate this being recorded sort of a couple of weeks out, but if it's something that you're putting off, it's probably not something you're motivated to do. If you've put an end date, if you're saying next week I'm going to start, or you're not motivated to start doing it now, then it's probably not going to be something that you really realistically going to be looking at doing. If you're not motivated to put down whatever you're doing now and start taking action now, then it's not there.
Yeah, I hear you with that. I saw a post, I think it was yesterday, about this. It's like somebody literally kind of quantified it in the fact that you're more than happy to spend, I don't know, 500 quid on coffee a year, 1,500 quid on gym membership, or there were all these kind of like
Yeah,
just general examples, but you're not willing to invest in 1,500 quid in life-changing coaching. What
yeah,
is that all about? But again, it comes down to priorities, right?
yeah. No, exactly that. I speak to a lot of people that want they've turned up because they feel they have to, and you know you, when you're speaking to them, you get a feeling pretty straight away whether they're serious or not. And it's when they come into you saying, "Look, I've already committed to doing it. What I need is some help to get an effective roadmap sorted out." That's when coaching is really effective for what I do. If people are coming and saying, "Look, I know I've got a few issues, but I don't really know what I want to be doing, and I don't really know if I need to be doing it," then it's probably not going to be a starter. But if it is something you want to be doing and you've already committed to making a few changes, then coaching can be really effective, because what it does, it will give you a real structure for what you're doing. And a big part for me is it's as much about giving people the information they need to make the decisions as well. For me, then again, we talk about the difference between sort of men and women when they're trying to sort problems out. And I'm really I'm trying not to generalise too much here, because I do appreciate, not all men, not all women. But on a whole, what I found, especially with policing, going in and, spending as much time as I did going in, sorting out some quite we're trying to sort out some quite complex personal situations. Men on a whole are looking for solutions, whereas women on a whole tend to be looking for sympathy, and not sort of that's how they cope, by talking about stuff. They can work through what's going on, whereas men are looking to understand what's going on and how do I fix it. And that's and for me, that's what is can be really effective with the coaching. So what I'm looking to do is give them as much information as well, so they can work out a lot of stuff for themselves as well. So not just relying on me to sort of supply the answers, because the reality is, for everyone with burnout, it's a very, very, very personal situation as well. I mean, I've got my whiteboard up there. You can't see it, but I've got listing all the different things that cause the burnout. Split between individual circumstances and professional circumstances, and between the two of them, I've managed to every so often I'm adding another one to it, and I'm up to 35 different things that can cause issues with it. And then in each of those, you can rank each of those mild, moderate, severe. So you got 30 odd times 3. So you're touching on nearly 100 different issues and combinations of all those. So everyone it is personal to them. So by sitting down and working out what it is, you can then start working out how to move forward with it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's an important point you kind of touched upon there, the kind of difference between, say, the cognitive and emotional support, that having a coach or somebody that's not maybe emotionally attached to the situation or to you can provide. Because I think sometimes maybe from a family point of view, you'll be trying to cure them or wrap someone up in cotton wool, when that's maybe not what actually they need.
No, and again, it's coaching is no difference to going to a gym for a PT. They'll sit there and they'll give you all the information, but you are the one that needs to do the reps. You still need to be, to lift the weight. You still need to do the exercise. They can show you how, and they can explain why you're doing it. But if you're not motivated to go and do the work yourself, and like I say, put yourself into that out of your comfort zone, that's the thing.
Okay, awesome. Speaking of people that are motivated to make those changes and they were interested in working with you, how could you support them?
Right, so obviously get in touch. And the first thing I do with everyone is just have a proper sit down, one-to-one, ideally face-to-face, but geographically with everything, with the way it is, it's normally over a Zoom, and we sit down. And I typically sort of book between sort of 60 and 90 minutes and just go through everything that's going on. And what I try and do for that first session, it's always free. It's always a complimentary sort of one-to-one, is offer a few sort of tips and sort of strategies just to help sort of in the meantime. But then also talk a little bit more about what I could do moving forward as well. So if anyone's got any issues and just want to run some stuff past me, I'm more than happy to sit down and just go through things.
Awesome. And how can I get in touch with you?
Okay, so either through website, theassuredman.com, or email zane@theassuredman.com, and through LinkedIn. Luckily, my mother was quite switched on when she named me, back in the 70s. So Zane McCormack is a very searchable name. So you type that into the search bar on LinkedIn, and I'm there. So don't have to worry too much about that.
Awesome. And all the links will be in the show notes so that you can get in touch with Zane. Awesome. So before we ride off into the sunset, I have one final question for you. And that is, what is your espresso shot of confidence for our listeners?
Okay. The one shot I'd give you is two things, actually. If you are looking at making any sort of change in what you're doing, two things you need to be doing is get curious. Don't accept the status quo. Don't accept that your situation can't be changed. Get curious. Start looking into what's going on there. Podcasts. There's so much information out there if you really want to go down that rabbit hole. So get curious and get intentional. Things aren't just going to happen. You need to step up and take action yourself. So get curious, get intentional.
Love it, man. Love it. Love that. I love just curious is my favorite word and favorite concept in the whole wide world. So I'm with you on that. So thank you so much for coming on today and being so generous with your time and your thoughts.
No, and thank you for having me, Ash.
It's been awesome. And thank you to you, our awesome listeners, wherever you are in the universe. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this to get notifications of when the next episode drops. And as always, don't forget to be awesome.